Noah is currently a final year medical student interning at a county hospital. He was assigned here by his department head for 3 months, temporarily living in a small rental room located in an alley opposite the hospital gates. Less than a 10-minute walk away, the old rental room had patchy, moldy walls, and the ceiling fan rattled loudly every time it spun fast. But because it was cheap and close, Noah didn't complain much. Since the day he moved down here, his internship schedule was almost fully booked all week. During the day, he ran paperwork. At night, he took shifts in the emergency room. There were nights with only a few mild cases, but there were also days when patients were admitted continuously and urgently. The smell of blood mixed with the strong odor of antiseptic filling his nose, and he could only get a little shut-eye by morning. Many times he was so tired and hungry that he didn't even have the energy to go eat. So whenever his stomach rumbled, Noah would stop by the porridge stall right in front of the hospital gates. That porridge stall was open from morning till night, run by an old woman who always wore a frayed, old jacket that covered her face tightly. Her name was Martha. The porridge was cheap, and a bowl wasn't fancy, usually just having a few scraps of meat, a piece of blood curd, and a sprinkle of fried shallots. Many people in the hospital frequently ate there, from the security guards to the doctors and nurses. At first, Noah found it normal, and after eating there a few times, it became a habit. It was just that recently, he kept noticing a rather strange smell coming from the porridge. At first, Noah thought he was hallucinating because he was tired, but the smell became clearer and clearer, a raw, fishy, musky scent, like meat left for a long time in a closed room. While eating, it wasn't obvious, but after swallowing, that smell seemed to linger somewhere in his throat. Noah figured he must be haunted by the metallic smell of blood in the hospital, causing him to imagine things. Working in the emergency room, every day he saw people bleeding, dead bodies covered with white sheets pushed right past his face. Anyone who wasn't used to it would be psychologically affected. Thinking so, Noah tried to brush off those ridiculous thoughts, even though that smell still lingered in his memory, as if it had never left. That night, after finishing work at nearly 1 a.m., Noah left the hospital. At this hour, almost all the lights around the hospital were turned off. The shops were cleared out, with only a few flickering lights from dim yellow bulbs. No one was selling anything anymore, and his stomach was growling in waves. So Noah went back to the familiar porridge stall. There was still the large pot of porridge sitting on a glowing red coal stove, steam billowing up. Martha was sitting huddled in the back. Hearing Noah approach, she slowly stood up without saying a word, just nodded in greeting, and then started ladling the porridge. Noah sat down on a plastic chair, ordered a bowl of minced pork porridge, thinking he would warm his stomach and then go home to rest. The late night was starting to get chilly. The hot porridge radiated heat that made his eyes sting. Noah held the spoon, stirred it gently, and scooped up the first spoonful. And this time, that smell appeared again. It wasn't just a faint whiff anymore, but clearly thick, as if something was rotting in the bowl of porridge that had just been scooped out less than a minute ago. Noah scooped the first spoonful, and before bringing it to his mouth, he froze. In the spoonful of porridge, mixed among the mushy rice grains and a thin layer of fat, was a small scrap of meat, but it didn't look like the familiar minced pork. It was long, flabby, and slightly curled at the edges as if it had been boiled for too long. Noah tilted the spoon, bringing it closer. The meat was grayish-brown, the edges were darker, and in the middle there seemed to be a faint, undissolved trace of a blood vessel. Noah had studied anatomy and had seen all kinds of muscles and tissues in the lab, and now a thought flashed through his mind that made his stomach churn. This didn't look like pork, but rather like a piece of human skin. Noah's heart started pounding. He stirred the spoon again, trying to look closely into the bowl of porridge. There were a few other small pieces of minced meat. They looked normal, but upon closer inspection, there were a few strands that looked like shredded tendons and pale red, fragmented membranes that were definitely not pig's blood. Noah put the spoon down, took a deep breath to stay calm. That musky smell from earlier was now clearer than ever. It was no longer a vague sensation, but a pungent, very strange stench. It wasn't the smell of fresh meat, but the scent of a corpse starting to decompose. Noah pushed his hand out, placing the spoon on the table, his tongue dry, his mind looping one single question over and over. What kind of meat is this? He swallowed hard, looked up at Martha, the stall owner, his voice hoarse. Excuse me, ma'am, what kind of meat is this? She didn't answer immediately. 1 second, 2 seconds passed before she slowly lifted her face, her eyes half hidden behind her mask and hat brim, her voice flat. It's pork, of course, child. Noah glanced down at the porridge bowl, pointing at the meat scrap. But this part is very strange. It's chewy, and its color is different from the other pieces. She followed his gaze, then bent over the porridge pot, stirring it around as if inspecting it, and then gave a soft laugh. It's probably because I reheated it too much. Business is a bit slow today. The porridge has been sitting for a while, so it's normal for the meat to change color a bit. After speaking, Martha lowered her head and remained silent, her 2 hands still slowly stirring the porridge in the pot. The sound of the ladle tapping against the pot's side clicked rhythmically, echoing in the quiet dead of night, sending a chill down Noah's spine. Noah felt a lump in his throat, even though he had been starving just moments ago. Looking at the bowl of porridge in front of him now only made him feel nauseous. He stood up, took his wallet out, pulled out a bill, then bowed his head and muttered, "I'll just pay for this." Martha looked up, her face more visible this time under the dim light, her deeply sunken eyes like the eye sockets of someone suffering from chronic insomnia, staring fixedly at Noah. A moment later, she shook her head, her voice raspy. "Oh, never mind. Consider it my apology. Sales were slow today, so the porridge got reheated, and the meat turned out like that." Noah forced a smile, a distorted one. He hastily stuffed the money back into his wallet and mumbled, "Thank you, ma'am." Then he turned and walked away very quickly. Stepping out of the yellowish fringe of light from the porridge stall, Noah heard the sound of the porridge ladle stirring and clinking behind him. Just as he was about to enter the alley, Noah suddenly turned his head back, and then he was startled. Martha was still standing there, holding the ladle but no longer stirring the porridge. She was staring after Noah, her deeply sunken eyes, with their cloudy whites, like a long blind person standing amidst the darkness. That gaze followed Noah until he turned into the small alley, disappearing from sight. Noah's neck suddenly felt freezing, as if a draft had blown right through his flesh. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked faster. For some reason, his heart was beating unusually fast. Normally, after finishing work at the hospital and taking a shower, Noah could fall asleep immediately. His body would be exhausted, his mind drained, and he would doze off in less than 10 minutes after lying down. But inexplicably, tonight was different. Even though he was under the blanket and the lights were out, Noah kept tossing and turning from side to side. That strange feeling still clung to him. The piece of meat in the porridge bowl earlier, Martha's gaze, the musky smell. Everything kept replaying in his head like a slow-motion film. Every time it replayed, Noah's heart twinged with discomfort. It took a long while before Noah could drift off to sleep. But his sleep was not peaceful, as if just as he sank down, he was pulled back up by something. In his restless state, Noah's ears picked up a dry, rhythmic sound. At first, it was vague, like the sound of someone closing a door somewhere, but it grew clearer and clearer. It was the sound of a meat cleaver, a sharp blade slamming down on a wooden cutting board, not rushed, not too forceful, but steady and decisive. Every single beat echoed through the quiet, chilling night. Noah snapped his eyes open, his heart pounding. He sat up and listened closely. The whole rental complex was dead silent. No sounds of conversation, no TV noise, only that chopping sound coming from an unknown direction, still echoing as if it were right outside his door. The chopping sound continued steadily, neither fast nor slow, with no other noises accompanying it, just that single sound repeating like a haunting drop dripping into his ear. Noah sat motionless on the bed, his back tense, staring blankly into the darkness ahead. And then he froze when he remembered that the house opposite his rental room was Martha's house, the owner of the porridge stall in front of the hospital gates. During the day, the house was tightly shut. People usually only saw her going in and out when she left with her porridge load. No one in the neighborhood was close to her. They only knew she had lived quietly like that for a long time. Noah hesitated for a moment. Then, as if spurred by something, he got out of bed, his bare feet stepping on the freezing tile floor, and tiptoed to the window of his rental room to listen again. The chopping sound was still there, but slightly softer, as if the person chopping had grown tired or was trying to be quiet so no one would find out. Noah gently peeked out the window. The night wind blew in, carrying a chill and a bit of moisture. He peered over at the house opposite. It was pitch black outside except for a sliver of murky yellow light spilling out from a small window near the ground. In that light, a silhouette flickered, and exactly at that moment, a cleaver slammed down, then another. The silhouette inside paused slightly, as if sensing someone watching, and slowly turned its head toward Noah's window. Noah's heart seemed to stop beating for a second when Martha's gaze slowly turned toward the window, looking directly at where he was standing. Without time to think further, Noah quickly pulled back, keeping absolutely silent. He pressed his back against the wall, his breath held tight in his chest. The dark room only had a faint glimmer of light from the small window crack. But right now, that light didn't make him feel any safer. 1 minute passed, then 2 minutes, and outside, the sound of the chopping cleaver resounded again as if it had never been interrupted. Martha had returned to her unfinished work. Noah slowly exhaled, cold sweat soaking his spine despite the chilly night. As the chopping sound rang out steadily again, Noah still didn't dare to breathe heavily. But then, as if driven by something, he gathered all his courage and slowly peeked outside one more time. The light from the small window of Martha's house still cast that murky, flickering yellow glow like an oil lamp. The silhouette inside was still hunched over, the cleaver rising and falling, and this time Noah saw more clearly on the dirty concrete floor lay a large wooden cutting board. Surrounded by red plastic trays holding raw meat, dark-colored membranes, and a few pieces still attached to pale white tendons that looked horrifying, but the thing that made Noah choke on his breath wasn't those pieces of meat, but a mass of liver lying among the pile. It was very large, dark in color, with deep fissures and a tangled web of blood vessels. Noah squinted. Having studied anatomy, he had seen all sorts of livers in the lab: pig livers, cow livers, even human liver specimens in the university storage, and he knew that was not an animal liver. Noah's heart raced. His hand leaned against the doorframe, trying to keep his balance, but his mind started spinning. Impossible. It couldn't be a human liver. In a split second, Martha leaned over and pulled the meat tray closer to herself. At that moment, the light clearly illuminated the surface of the liver once more. The tissue texture, color, size, all confirmed what Noah had just thought. Noah couldn't look anymore. He slumped down onto the floor, his mouth hanging open, but unable to let out a scream. There was no doubt left. The thing Martha was preparing in the dead of night was a piece of human liver. Noah sat dazed in his rental room, his back against the wall, his eyes wide open staring into the void. The image of the slimy meat tray and that mass of liver. The human liver kept playing over and over in his head like a hauntingly slow-motion scene. Noah's eyes stung. His throat was dry and bitter. Waves of nausea surged up again and again, but he couldn't throw up anything. He couldn't go back to sleep no matter how exhausted his body was. And in just a few hours he had to be at the hospital for his morning shift. Yet he sat there all night like a ghost, not turning on the lights, not checking his phone, unable to get even a second of shut-eye. Nearing 6 a.m., the sound of sporadic vehicles began echoing on the street. The sun hadn't fully risen, The sky was still a hazy gray, and it was chilly. Noah changed his clothes and stepped out of his rental room, his gait sluggish like a man completely drained of energy. On the way to the hospital, everything around was normal. Shops started setting up. People caught rides to work. The rustling sound of a broom sweeping trash echoed at the alley's entrance. Everything was terrifyingly normal, as if nothing had happened last night. Noah walked into the duty room with a haggard, pale face, his eyes sunken deep, looking no different from someone who had just walked out of a morgue. By lunch break, Noah sat numbly in the duty room. The lunchbox in front of him still untouched. The hospital cafeteria food was usually decent, but today he couldn't swallow a bite. His mind was still spinning with the images from last night. The tray of meat, the mass of liver, Martha's eyes, the sound of the meat cleaver echoing in the silent night felt like a blow striking his last nerve. Noah rested his chin on his hand, staring down at the table, his fingers tapping a rhythmic, unconscious beat. He felt trapped in fear, trapped in disgust, and in self-doubt. Could he have seen it wrong? Could it really just have been pig liver? Maybe he was too stressed. So he imagined it, but before that voice could convince him, another part immediately rebutted it. No. He had studied anatomy. He knew exactly what a human liver looked like. Noah clutched his head, closing his eyes for a moment, his throat parched, his forehead dotted with sweat despite the fan in the room. He didn't know what to do. Report to the police, but what would he say? He only saw a mass of liver with no evidence, no pictures, no witnesses. People might say he was paranoid or accuse him of slandering someone in the middle of the night. He sighed. Every thought led to a dead end. That whole afternoon, Noah didn't eat, didn't rest, just sat there like a lifeless shell, with only one question looping in his head. What on earth was that porridge stall cooking? That evening, after finishing a long, exhausting day at the hospital, Noah returned to his rental room in a state of sheer exhaustion. He took a quick shower, then collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to turn on the lights. The street lamp outside the window cast a dim patch of light, enough to see the damp, peeling stains on the ceiling. He closed his eyes, trying to banish the horrific images from last night out of his head. But the harder he tried to forget, the clearer they became. The chicken joint, the fishy smell, the sound of the meat cleaver. A moment later, Noah sighed, opened his eyes to look at the ceiling, and told himself, it's probably just work-induced trauma. I'm too stressed, sleep-deprived, and seeing things. That porridge stall had been operating in front of the hospital gates for a very long time. It wasn't newly opened, nor did it have any prior bad reputation. Dozens of people ate there every day, sometimes hundreds. From patients and their families to doctors and nurses, if something as terrible as he thought was really happening, how come no one had noticed? Could it be that for all these years, only he had seen it? Noah rolled over, hugging his pillow, continuing to think that he was in the final sprint. With only a little over a month left in his internship, if he caused trouble now and was misunderstood as slandering or creating chaos, he might easily get suspended. He didn't want to be a busybody and get entangled in trouble. Thinking of the prospect of being called in for questioning, having to explain what he saw in the dead of night with no evidence other than his memory, Noah suddenly shuddered at how absurd it sounded. So he decided to put it aside, not getting involved and not telling anyone, just stopping eating porridge there. That would be it. Noah pulled the blanket up to his neck, trying to sleep, but inexplicably, his ears still caught the sound of the meat cleaver echoing somewhere in the pitch-black night. That night, Noah drifted off without realizing it. Sleepiness crashed over him like a defense mechanism after hours of stress. But sleep didn't bring rest. He started to dream, in the dream. Noah saw himself standing in the hospital's morgue, a place students were not allowed to enter without special permission. There was no one around. The fluorescent lights flickered constantly, casting a cold, bluish-white glow onto the gray tiled floor. The air was heavy, carrying a scorched, metallic smell, the smell of blood and raw meat. Noah walked slowly down the corridor, each footstep echoing as if he were walking in an empty void. The door to the body storage room was ajar. He pushed it open, and then he saw stainless steel trays scattered across the middle of the room, holding dismembered human body parts. Intestines, livers, lungs, even eyeballs and severed hands. One particularly large tray sat in the middle of the room, containing a chaotic mess, dark red chunks of meat mixed with hair, bones, and blood dripping onto the floor. In the middle of that pile of meat was a human face that had been peeled off. The eyes were staring wide open, and Noah realized it was himself. Before he could scream, the heavy sound of a cleaver rang out from behind him. Noah whipped around. Martha was standing right at the door, holding a massive butcher knife dripping with blood. She wasn't wearing her mask. Her face was wrinkled and pale, but her eyes were pitch black and sunken, like two bottomless pits. "Have some minced meat porridge, child," she said, her voice echoing as if from deep underground. Noah screamed and stumbled backward, but his foot slipped on something soft on the floor. It was a human lung, still soaking wet with blood. He screamed loudly and woke up with a start. The rental room was pitch black. His pillow drenched in sweat, his heart pounding as if it were about to burst from his chest. The next morning, the sky was gloomy, and thick fog hung like a layer of smoke hovering over the road. Noah walked out of the rental alley, his mind still groggy from the horrific nightmare last night. His whole body felt heavy. His eyes had dark circles, and his steps lacked strength. As he trudged toward the hospital, Noah's gaze unconsciously darted toward the porridge stall opposite the hospital gates, and then he froze. There, right in front of the steaming pot of porridge, stood a mother and son. The mother, wearing a thin jacket, was smiling and chatting with Martha. Meanwhile, the little boy, about 5 or 6 years old, skinny and still sporting dark circles under his eyes from a recent illness, was tugging at his mother's arm, looking up at the porridge pot with a hungry expression. Noah panicked because he recognized the boy. It was the pediatric patient who had just been rushed into the emergency room a few days ago. Due to acute diarrhea, high fever, and dehydration, the doctors had to give him IV fluids all night. Without a second thought, Noah immediately sprinted over, his heart racing frantically. "Ma'am, wait. Don't let him eat porridge here," he blurted out, the panic almost bursting from his mouth. The mother turned around, looking at Noah in surprise. "Oh, what's wrong, doctor?" "He just recovered. Eating porridge makes the most sense, doesn't it?" Noah was tongue-tied. He couldn't outright say what he knew because he had no proof, no validation, only the obsession of an utterly exhausted man. He tried to keep his voice calm. The boy just recovered. His stomach is still weak. It's best to cook porridge at home to be safe." The mother hesitated slightly, but seemed not completely convinced. During that moment, Martha stood behind the counter, silently watching Noah, her deeply sunken, freezing, expressionless eyes held something in their gaze that made goosebumps erupt down Noah's spine, a look that said she knew exactly what he had seen, the silent threat, subtle yet unmistakable. "I've been cooking porridge for decades, doctor," Martha said slowly, her voice flat. "No one has ever complained. To eat or not is up to each person." Noah clenched his fists. He knew very well that if he misspoke, if he said something no one believed, the person deemed guilty would be him. Then the mother, after hearing Noah out, paused for a moment, her eyes darting across the porridge pot and then down to her son tugging her shirt. She paused for a few seconds, then nodded, her voice apologetic. "Well then, I'll go home and cook some separate porridge for him. Anyway, since he just recovered, the grandmother is also a bit worried." Noah gave a slight nod, unable to hide his relief. He bowed slightly in greeting, then turned and walked toward the hospital, trying to keep his steps perfectly calm, not too rushed, but not slow either. Even without looking back, Noah could clearly feel a freezing gaze piercing through his back like a sharp blade. That gaze was still there, from behind the porridge counter, a gaze that didn't need to scream or threaten, yet made Noah's spine run cold. Martha was watching Noah, and even without a sound, without a single word, Noah still knew that look was a warning. At noon that day, after completing some medical records, Noah took a quick trip to the restroom to wash his hands before eating lunch. He felt tired, his eyes still stinging, and his body felt as if he were carrying a boulder, a baseless exhaustion, a mental exhaustion. The restroom door slammed shut behind him. The bluish-white fluorescent light flickered on with a click. The space inside was cool, covered in white tiles, smelling of soap mixed with antiseptic. Noah walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and cold water flowed out. He put both hands under the water, then leaned over to grab the soap, but just as he bent down, he froze. Inside the sink, the water was still running, but drifting sluggishly underneath the water flow was something red and slimy. He blinked, seeing a streak of blood. And then that red, slimy thing started to become clearer under the light. It was a piece of liver accompanied by a blood-stained white tendon clinging to the side of the sink. Drop by drop, dark red blood seeped out from the drain pipe, as if the sink itself was bleeding. Noah recoiled, his heart tightening in his chest. No, impossible. He stood rooted to the spot, staring at the running water, his hands trembling, a piece of human liver, clearly a human liver, and blood was still flowing, not rushing but dripping steadily like remnants from an autopsy on a freshly dead corpse left in the drainage system. He held his breath, taking another step back, and then the lights suddenly went out. Darkness descended unexpectedly, making Noah flinch, his heart feeling like it would drop out of his chest. He staggered, his hands groping the wall. A few seconds later, the lights flickered back on, and the sink was spotlessly clean, with only crystal clear water gurgling down. There was no blood, no liver, nothing at all. Noah stood panting, the back of his shirt drenched in sweat, his hands shaking violently, his head spinning. That night, despite not having a shift, Noah stayed at the hospital until late because he had a lot of paperwork to process. Plus, a few new severe cases had just been transferred in. He had to help the nurses take care of them due to a staff shortage. By the time everything was done, the clock was nearing 3 a.m. The hospital was unusually quiet at this hour, with no sounds of people passing by or families asking questions. There was only the dim yellow light illuminating the long, echoing corridors. Noah walked to the side gate to return to his rental room, taking a small path, cutting through the administrative area. Inexplicably, even though he could have taken a different route, his feet unconsciously followed the path close to the morgue. Perhaps it was due to exhaustion, or maybe he was being guided by something. When he was just a few meters away from the morgue, Noah suddenly stopped. Ahead, under the weak light, he saw a man wearing medical protective gear. A long blue gown and a hood, carrying a large black bag, quietly stepping out from the side door of the morgue. His gait was hurried, hunching over slightly and looking around as if afraid of being caught. Noah narrowed his eyes. The bag was quite large and seemed heavy because the man's arm was pulled down, his steps uneven, each step emitting a soft thud sound in the night. A question immediately popped into Noah's head. What could possibly be in the morgue at this hour that needed to be taken outside? A chill ran down his spine. He stood frozen, his heart pounding. He pressed himself against a nearby pillar. Only daring to watch from afar, the man walked very fast, following the corridor and turning toward the hospital's side gate. Noah couldn't get a good look at his face, but the silhouette absolutely did not resemble any staff or nurse he had ever met at the hospital. Noah held his breath, trying to tail the man's silhouette in extreme suspense. But as soon as he saw the man turn directly into his rental alley, he stopped dead in his tracks as if someone had yanked him back by the neck. Noah's entire body went cold. He immediately pressed himself tightly against a tree trunk on the sidewalk right in front of the hospital's side gate. Gripping his bag straps tightly, cold sweat starting to bead on his forehead, he stood there motionless, trying to keep his breathing as slow as possible. It was a long while later, after seeing the man come back out, that he dared to tiptoe inside, The alley was as dark as every other day, with only a few pale yellow bulbs hovering high above, casting a sleepy light onto the patchy concrete road. Noah hadn't even gathered his wits when he suddenly froze. Right in the alley. Martha was hunched over in front of her gate. In her hands was a large black plastic bag. It was the same bag the man had just carried out from the morgue. Noah was absolutely certain. There was no mistaking it. Noah's heart seemed to stop beating for a few seconds. His feet were rooted to the spot, not daring to move. His eyes locked onto that black bag. Seeing Noah, Martha wasn't surprised or startled. She only smiled, an artificial grin that stretched her cheeks wide, deepening the wrinkles carved by time. But her eyes were as freezing as ice. "Oh, late shift tonight." She shook the bag in her hand and added, her voice sickeningly sweet, but bizarre, "I just went to the early market to get fresh ingredients to cook porridge. This stuff is reserved only for regular customers, so drop by tomorrow morning and support me, okay?" Noah couldn't reply. A lump formed in his throat, and his mouth went dry. He just gave a slight bow in greeting and walked extremely fast into his rental room. Afterward, even though he locked the door, turned off the lights, and pulled the blanket completely over his head, Noah couldn't manage to get a wink of sleep. The images kept looping in his head like a glitched movie film. The black plastic bag, the silhouette in the protective suit, Martha's elongated smile. Finally, without knowing when, he fell asleep in a state as tense as a drawn bowstring. And then the nightmare began. Noah found himself standing in the middle of a pitch-black room with no doors, no exits, only 4 freezing stainless steel walls, surrounded by the steady, rhythmic drip sound. He looked down. Beneath his feet was a massive pool of blood. From the ceiling, rusted steel meat hooks hung down, dangling human body parts. Some still had hair attached, some had tattoos. There were skinny hands trembling in the air as if still trying to wave. Noah backed away in terror, but bumped into an operating table. On the table lay the corpse of a young woman with her chest sliced wide open, her abdominal cavity gaping empty, clotted black blood pooling inside, her eyes staring wide open at him in a pleading gaze. Another scene showed a child whose stomach was slashed from chest to navel, intestines spilling out. Person after person appeared around him, one by one, corpses missing their organs, mouths mutilated yet still trying to whisper, "Save me. Don't let her cook me. She took my liver for the porridge." Noah covered his ears and eyes, backing away in despair, but the more he covered them, the clearer the sounds became. The sound of a meat cleaver thwack, thwack, echoed behind his back. He turned around. Martha stood there wearing a blood-soaked apron, wielding a butcher knife, her grotesque smile splitting almost to her ears. "Minced meat porridge, child." Then she stepped up and forcefully slammed the knife onto the table. A human head rolled out. It was his own. eyes wide open, mouth agape as if trying to scream, but no sound came out. Noah screamed, his voice breaking amidst the relentless chopping of the cleaver. And then he woke up with a start. The room was still pitch black, his throat parched, his heart beating wildly, his pajamas drenched in sweat, his pillow soaked. It took him a moment to realize he was still alive, but the echoing voices in his head didn't stop. She took my liver to cook porridge. From that haunting dream onward, Noah could no longer pretend nothing had happened. Every glance, every tiny detail, every imagined knife strike slowly eroded him. And he knew that if he continued to stay silent, he would be just a bystander ignoring evil, while he himself was studying and soon to be working in the medical field. Noah began secretly looking into the body handling procedures at the county hospital. He carefully read every line of the regulations, dug through internal records, and quietly asked questions of those familiar with the rules. And then Noah realized something was wrong. No one was allowed to take a body or any body parts out of the morgue without permission. All activities required a formal request and a supervising official. But clearly, that man had done it stealthily in the middle of the night. Noah decided to act. During his night shifts, Noah took turns doing his duties while keeping an eye on the direction of the morgue. One day, he quietly tailed the man and recorded it on his phone. That man's silhouette appeared again at the exact same time, in the exact same manner, carrying that exact same black plastic bag, walking through the night toward the side gate. All of this was saved by Noah. But only by seeing inside with his own eyes could Noah be absolutely sure he wasn't going crazy. That night, Martha's porridge stall still glowed with a red fire as usual. The aroma of minced meat porridge rose fragrantly, weaving into the hazy smoke on the sidewalk. A few people were still sitting and eating. A car pulled over to buy some to go. Noah watched from a distance to make sure she was outside. Then he turned into the alley. For the first time in his life, Noah did something that made him tremble and something he had never thought he'd do, breaking into Martha's house. The fence was only chest high. He managed to climb over it, then crouched and tiptoed along the small path leading to the back of the house. The narrow passage was full of trash and rotting leaves, the musty smell mixing with something raw, fishy, and decaying. The kitchen door had an old, flimsily hooked padlock. Noah used a prepared screwdriver, wedged it in, and pried it hard crack. The lock popped open, the wooden door creaked ajar, and a foul, pungent stench violently assaulted him, like dozens of corpses that had just bloated in an airtight space. Noah covered his nose and stepped inside. The kitchen was pitch black. There was only a dim, flickering round bulb on the ceiling. In the middle of the room was a massive stainless steel table. On it lingered a few strands of hair and a few streaks of dried brown blood sticking like scars on the cold steel. And then Noah's eyes stopped at the large refrigerator at the end of the room. He approached, his hands trembling, his palms breaking out in a cold sweat. The refrigerator door swung open, and the nightmare became reality. Inside were scattered numerous plastic bags, big and small, each containing human organs, livers, lungs, stomachs, intestines, hearts. Some still intact with blood vessels dangling as if just extracted from a body. In the bottom drawer, Noah saw a severed human hand, its nails still caked with dirt and painted with pink polish. Some bags were labeled with a black marker, 12-year-old child's liver, female thigh meat, clean small intestines. Everything was unmistakable, and there was no excuse left. This kitchen was not a place for cooking. It was a human slaughterhouse. Noah stood frozen before the refrigerator door that was gaping open like a monster's mouth, revealing a true hell made of human flesh inside. His heart raced, his head spun. He wanted to scream, to vomit, to run away, but because he was so stunned, Noah didn't realize the front door had just softly opened. Steady, rhythmic footsteps echoed, soft yet cold, like the sound of fingernails scraping against stone. A dry voice, hardened like cold steel, rang out right behind him. "I commend you for finding your way here. I knew you'd snoop around eventually." Noah jolted and spun around. Martha was standing there, the weak light cast onto her face deepening her wrinkles, her eyes glowing red in the dimness. Next to her was a tall man wearing a medical mask. Without needing to think, Noah knew it was the guy who had been transporting human organs out of the hospital. In each of their hands, glinting under the light, was a butcher knife. "Now that you know, you have to die," Martha smirked, her smile stretching all the way to her ears. The man stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding like a clock ticking down to the hour of death. Panicked, Noah stumbled backward into the chair behind him. His back hit the edge of the refrigerator, his eyes never leaving the two figures slowly advancing. Step by step, their shadows loomed over his body like the shadow of the Grim Reaper. Noah screamed, reaching his hand out to grab anything to defend himself, but the blade was already raised high, just a second away from plunging down. Suddenly, a thunderous kick blasted the door open, a blinding flashlight beam sweeping straight inside. "Police! Put your hands up!" Martha and the man flinched. Before they could react, they were subdued on the spot. Noah collapsed onto the floor, drenched in sweat, his eyes wide open, as if unable to believe what had just happened. A police officer hurriedly ran over to help him up. "Are you all right?" "We've been investigating this case for a long time." Noah just nodded, his whole body trembling, unable to speak a single word. The putrid stench from the refrigerator was still there. All around were butcher knives, basins of blood, the red-hot coal stove, all undeniable evidence of a real-life nightmare. The final truth revealed by the authorities shocked both the hospital and the residents of the area. Martha and the man named Hank, who regularly sneaked black plastic bags out of the morgue, were actually henchmen for a human organ trafficking ring. Incredibly sophisticated and barbaric, the ringleaders were a group of doctors at the county hospital where Noah was interning, bodies without relatives to claim them, usually homeless people, undocumented drifters, or unidentified deaths, would be secretly gutted, the usable organs extracted to be smuggled out. Taking advantage of the county hospital's lax oversight mechanisms and manipulated ledgers, Hank was the one responsible for transport. He sneaked the body parts processed by those doctors out of the morgue every night. Through the side gate, Martha, a character thought to be just an ordinary porridge vendor, was actually a rapid transit point where the organs were handed over in the dead of night to the main transporters. Everything had to take place in an extremely short time frame, adhering to strict preservation protocols to ensure delivery to the recipients before the tissues and organs deteriorated. However, there were some organs that couldn't be sold because they didn't meet the standards. They were given to Martha to dispose of herself, as long as it was done discreetly. Furthermore, there were bodies already mangled by accidents. After being sliced open and completely emptied of organs, they were reduced to a pulpy mass of flesh and bone, impossible to reconstruct normally. In those cases, the cruel group of doctors chose to dispose of the entire remaining corpse, to erase all traces, and of course, the person dealing with the aftermath was none other than Martha. The person who received flesh and blood as if merely taking a familiar batch of goods. And it was here that the true nature of a psychopathic, twisted, and wicked monster was revealed in its original form. Martha, with a warped and sick mindset, came up with the most horrific way to dispose of the organs and human remains, chopping them up, cooking them, mixing them into the minced meat porridge, and selling them to customers to eat every day. Not only that, she also mixed in various chemical spices and illegal flavorings to mask the foul, fishy stench, even using artificial meat flavorings to make the dish smell appetizing. Hundreds of people had unwittingly become reluctant accomplices in that gruesome crime. Things went on like that until that night when Noah, prompted merely by an unusual scrap of meat in a bowl of porridge and a chilling premonition, began to ask questions. In addition, despite their sophisticated operations, the criminal group still left some traces that prompted law enforcement to investigate. They traced the human trafficking ring back to its starting point, the county hospital, a place supposed to be a sanctuary for saving lives. From there, every puzzle piece of a real-life nightmare was exposed, from the images in the morgue, the stealthy silhouettes, the refrigerator full of organs, to the dreams of restless, unavenged souls. Fortunately, no one lost their lives from accidentally consuming that toxic porridge. The authorities intervened in time, taking test samples and confiscating all the physical evidence, the mere mention of which is enough to make anyone vomit violently. And fortunately, the police burst in just in time. If they had been just a few minutes late, Noah might now be reduced to a few pieces of minced meat mixed in the boiling pot of porridge, a thing carelessly sold in front of the hospital gates day by day. People would stop by to buy some to go as a familiar part of their daily lives. That terrifying truth ended with heavy sentences. As for Noah, although he escaped death, he still carried an unhealable scar within him. Every time he walked past a roadside porridge stall, he would catch a faint, savory aroma, but in his heart, he would only feel a metallic stench like blood and a chill like the smell of blood-soaked human organs. The day the criminal group, including the doctors in the ring, Martha and Hank, were brought to court, was also the last day Noah ended his internship at the county hospital. He packed his things and checked out of the rental room, a short journey but engraved in his memory like a knife wound. It was sharp, deep, and utterly haunting. In the courtroom, not a single one of the criminals showed any remorse. They sat straight-backed, faces as cold as stone, eyes lifeless, as if cutting open corpses to extract organs and then cooking them for others to eat was no different from ordinary kitchen work. The courtroom lights shone down on each of those faces. Every wrinkle, every gaze was frigid and devoid of emotion. Noah, standing among the people invited to testify, and looked at them and felt a chill radiating from his spine all the way down to the soles of his feet. But before human justice could be fully handed down, the justice of the underworld struck first. While in custody awaiting execution of their sentences, each member of the criminal group died under abnormal circumstances. One doctor was found dead in his solitary confinement cell, all the organs in his abdomen completely ripped out, even though the door was still locked from the inside. Hank went insane, screaming every day, "Don't take my liver, I don't want to go in the pot," before being found having bitten his own tongue to death in the night. Blood splattered on the cell wall in the shape of a human hand. As for Martha, she died at exactly 3 a.m., her mouth gaping wide as if screaming. Her eyes rolled back, her face stretched as if being boiled in a pot of water. Inside her cell at that moment, a heavy stench of meat porridge arose, even though there was absolutely nothing inside. No one understood why. Only Noah, who had seen the eyes of the vengeful souls in his dream that year, knew that the dead cannot speak, but they will find a way to reclaim what was stolen from them.